Our favorite president, yes, the one, the only, President Traoré, has been urged by his people of Burkina Faso to extend his presidential tenure. Tell me where you have heard of such. Yeah, I'll wait. Also, can someone riddle me this? Are we really free if we have the right to opinions but not the right to choices? Because tell me why a woman was arrested and intimidated by her own government for protesting about a dysfunctional health insurance system. These questions need to be answered. And finally, happy International Day of Clean Energy. Yes, you heard that right. We've got something fun that we're celebrating on the channel today. And I cannot wait to tell you about everything that the African Development Bank is doing to save the lives of 600,000 women and children across the continent. So stay tuned, guys, because we're about to have a fun and informative conversation. Indeed, we are about to have a good time. Hello guys, and welcome back to another phenomenal episode that we are about to have. I am so excited to have you guys here and to get into the thick of today's discussion. So as you would have seen from the thumbnail, we are discussing something which if you go and search on Google, you will not be able to find it. So what exactly am I talking about? What I'm saying is that if you go on Google right now and you type in Burkina Faso protesting to have President Traoré extend his tenure, you will not find it. You will not find a single article. You will not find a single you understand what I'm saying? And the sites that do cover it are, the YouTube channels that do a really great job in covering, a range of African stories that most, normal streams of media would not normally cover. And so if you're asking yourself, how did you get the story? Well, I got it from one of these very same platforms that I'm talking about, and the name is the African Diaspora News Channel. I will tag them here in the description below. They really do a great job on covering some content that you will not normally see everywhere. So with that being said, I think also this topic for me is yet again a direct call or a challenge to all of us on why it is that we need to be intentional about keeping up to date with things that are happening on the continent outside of the normal channels of media and information, but also to make sure that we retweet, we share, we really make a noise about it, because guys, no one else is going to. And this is such a good and powerful story because of the things that I'm going to share. And so what are those things? One of the things I want to talk about is the things that President Traoré has done in his 2-year tenure that is making the people of Burkina Faso protest and urge him to continue on. And they are doing this because he has made an announcement stating that he wants to return the government back to being, back to the politicians, and have the state be back to a to function in a democratic, process or system. And so, in as much as the people were understanding, they said declined. They said we don't think so. So that was just really interesting to see, and I can definitely understand why President Traoré might, believe that it is good for him to, step down. I believe that, he also understands that he has achieved the mission and the mandate with which he came in to succeed, and that was really to put the people of Burkina Faso first and implement changes that were gonna really benefit them and no one else. And he's done that. I really think he's effectively done that. that, because in October of 2003, when he was officially pledged into presidency, these were the three things that he said he was going to do. The first was that he was going to dramatically improve the security situation in Burkina Faso. The second was that he was going to uplift the social and economic standing of the people of Burkina Faso. And the third was that he was going to seek new alliances and disregard the former French alliance that really did a number in terms of keeping their economy underdeveloped and orchestrated many complex security situations that have kept the state on its knees. As some of us may or may not know, Burkina Faso is not the only country to accuse France of intentionally creating these very insecure situations that would put these Sahel states at a very vulnerable situation. That's what I'm looking for, in terms of their own, security and in terms of their sovereignty. And this obviously was intentionally done with the efforts of ensuring that these countries consistently stay dependent on the French troops that was there, and also on the French providing it with the necessary, ammunition and, weapons that they need to defend themselves. So without wasting any more time, let me jump into the major things that President Traoré has been able to do for his country. Again, if you go on Google and you just put a simple search saying things President Traoré has done for Burkina Faso in his tenure, that's what you'll find. Cricketing as they always cricket, okay? And this is so unfortunate. So I had to really be intentional about picking up the things from the various different platforms and pages and channels that have been covering this work in the last 2 years. So there's about 24 here, so I'm gonna really try speed straight into them. I want to follow this with a discussion on Walter Rodney's book, his book specifically from 1952, titled How Europe Has Underdeveloped Africa. And why am I bringing up this book? I believe that this book, gives an amazing, indication or illustration rather of how it is that European countries have taken very conceited and strategic efforts to make sure that Africa stays on its knees and stays underdeveloped. And I want to use that in contrast to what it is that Burkina Faso's President Traoré has been able to do to further develop his own state, when he essentially fought these very things that Walter Rodney brought up in his book. So I think it's going to be just a nice contrast of things, and will also speak to the reality that everything that Walter Rodney said was inevitably the truth, because when you now have somebody actually take these ideas and actually start fighting or resisting them, there's been results, So the first thing that has happened under President Traoré's tenure is that Burkina Faso's GDP has grown from approximately $18 billion to $22.1 billion. President Traoré intentionally rejected loans from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, stating that Africa does not need the IMF or World Bank, Europe or America, as it can stand on its own. The third thing is that he reduced the salaries of ministers and parliamentarians by 30% and increased the salaries of civil servants by 50%. The fourth is that he refused to accept a president's salary and rather maintained his salary as a military captain. The fifth is that he established 2 tomato processing plants, and this was the first ever in Burkina Faso. And I want to just pivot here quickly by saying that this is really exceptional, considering the fact that a lot of African countries have experienced a great deal of hindrances and intentional delays in them being able to industrialize and be able to manufacture their own products that we normally locally now get from imports. The sixth thing that he did is that he stopped the export of unrefined Burkina Faso gold to Europe. And this is what he said in the statement alluding to this. He said, "I don't understand why we allow multinationals to mine gold when we know how. That's why I announced the withdrawal of the licenses, and we are going to do it for ourselves." And he really has done so, because point number 7 is that in 2023 he inaugurated a state-of-the-art gold mine to enhance local producing capabilities. I'll see if I can insert a video or a picture somewhere here to basically show those gold bars that they have been able to locally produce themselves. Number 8 is that he built Burkina Faso's second processing plant. Previously the country only had one. And number 9 is that he opened the first ever National Support Center for Artisan Cotton Producing to assist local cotton farmers. Now, you might think that this is not a big deal, but this really is something that is serving as a huge fight back from colonial impacts on the continent. And that is the fact that a lot of the products that we now import, they came in and they were intentionally just injected into our markets because of how local production was completely stagnated, even though we had the raw products to be able to do that. So this is just really chef's kiss. Number 10 is that he banned the wearing of British legal wigs and gowns in local courts and introduced traditional Burkina Babe attire. So I'll also see if I can find a picture and put it somewhere here. Number 11, he prioritized agriculture by distributing 400 tractors, 339 tillers, 710 motor pumps, and 714 motorcycles to boost production and support rural stakeholders. This is really exceptional, considering the fact that a lot of rural or small farmers or even small businesses do not have the required credits, or rather assets, that a local bank would demand for them to be able to put against a loan, and so government really is essential in coming in and serving as an equalizer in how it can just take people who have got the talent, have got the means, have got the capacity, can give them the necessary funding so that they can also become active agents within the existing market. So this really was just such a delight to read about. Number 12 is that he provided access to improved seeds and other farm inputs to maximize agricultural output. Number 11 is that due to the two factories that have been also implemented to start manufacturing and producing local products, tomato production in Burkina Faso has increased drastically. Number 14 is that millet production has also risen to about 1.1 million metric tons in 2024. 15, rice production has also increased. 16, he banned French military operations in Burkina Faso. He banned French media. Number 18, he expelled French troops from the country. And number 19, he has already begun constructing new roads, widening existing ones, and upgrading gravel roads to become paved surfaces. Number 20, he is in the process of building a new airport, and this airport, once fully functional, should be able to bring in, I believe, 1.5 million people annually. So, and guys, this is so important, especially from a place of commerce and tourism, which are also big fuelers of a country's economic success and development. And so to just know that we can be able to now easily access the country, whether it is for the purposes of trade, whether it's for the purposes of just you seeing the country, is gonna be a big added bonus on their part and on our part as well, because I don't think many people have been to Burkina Faso. I am one of such people, so soon that will change. Number 21 is that he dropped French as the official language, and then 22, he removed French colonial rulers' names from the streets, so there was a lot of street name changes. Number 23, he paid off Burkina Faso's local debts, and 24, he made a decree enabling citizens to report cases of corruption directly through him through an anonymous channel. And guys, this is just like, I'm sure there's so much more, but obviously this is just a few things that we are able to know about from what has been shared on various platforms. But again, it's just so exciting and so exhilarating, and it's no wonder that we, you know, call President Traoré our favorite president, because he's doing the things that need to be done, and he's really showing us that there is generally no excuse for why it is that African leaders cannot bring about or effect the change that our countries need. And again, I will always reiterate this point. It's not me saying that these things will not happen at a cost. There will definitely be a sacrifice. There will definitely be a cost. There will definitely be a price that has to be paid. But that does not mean that, you know, we do not have the means to be able to do that. But secondly, it does not mean that the people do not understand that to get to the promised land, we're going to have to fight off some giants. that was good. That was good, guys. The Bible will always have just great words. All right, so with that, I'm going to now move on to the discussion on Walter Rodney's book on basically dealing with underdevelopment. And I want to deal with some of the main themes that he discusses as the causes or the reasons for why Africa will remain underdeveloped for as long as these things are in place. So the first thing he talks about and he highlights is what happened during slavery and colonization, and that was the huge economic drain, right? We know that European colonial powers extracted a great deal of Africa's wealth, and this wealth included everything from minerals, crops, labor, and they benefited their economies and essentially left African countries with nothing. Now, just to give a bit of context to all of this, when colonization happened, it coincided with Europe's economy having reached a cap, right? Having reached a certain limit. So their market and their industrialization and Renaissance had reached its highest of heights, especially in the sense of them having one, resources, and two, a greater market, right, for them to bring their products out to. So what countries like Africa or South America or other places that were colonized did is that it helped to remove this cap of limitation by providing them with new markets where they could sell their goods and services, and thus ultimately further strengthen themselves and further enrich their own people in endless ways. But secondly, it also allowed for them to have an expansion on raw resources that they were really just not having anymore, because again, we're at a cap. That is also something again that deserves its own deep dive, because obviously the story is way more detailed than that. But I just wanted to help us understand how we were used as a way of setting a foundation for many of these global powers to be the global powers that they were today. And they did it because of, guys, if you want to get free labor, if you're going to get free supplies, right, for your business, obviously you're gonna make gang money, because you're not having to pay for that labor, you're not having to pay for those supplies. So essentially that is what slavery and colonization was in the simplest of terms. And many of these raw materials that were taken, whether it's during slavery or during colonization, were things that even till today African countries under neo-colonization export as raw materials, and then they will import the finished products of those bags. So for example, like rubber during the times of colonization in Congo, and also things such as gold in Ghana. So Africa was left with little or nothing, to basically use as fuel for their own industrialization efforts, right? And another thing that we must also understand is that there was a huge displacement of local industries. What I mean by this is that local industries, local markets were completely destroyed because of how colonizers flooded our markets with cheap European goods, thus creating a lot of dependency on their imports. One such example that you'll see, or how this trend essentially started, or some of the ways in which it started, was how during the slave trade, when people would give slaves, many a time some of the things that they would get in return would be things like French textiles, would be weapons that they would use for war, and also in some cases even would be like alcohol. So it wasn't even things that were benefiting the advancement of any economy, you understand. Another thing that slavery did negatively for us was the huge human resource loss. And Rodney explains how we had a huge number of people, I think it's maybe even possibly 2 generations, where the youngest, the strongest, able-bodied were taken, and these were people who could have essentially contributed to our own advancement in various ways. And obviously them being taken was to fuel again Europe's own industrial revolution, with Africa getting no benefit whatsoever. And then the fourth thing that happened is that neocolonization took place after independence. And let me just give a quick scenario. Imagine you are in a country where a colonized country. So colonized country would mean that the colonizers are the government that is in power, and in Anglophone countries they would use a system of divide and conquer. So they would use traditional systems like the chiefs as basically the middleman that would basically enforce the oppressive rule over the majority of the people. Because again, guys, colonizers didn't have the numbers in terms of them being physically here, so they really had to be strategic in how they can get a majority of the people enslaved with the small numbers that they were, right? So you have these people, they come here, they establish the government systems, they establish the infrastructure, they establish the rules of trade. They are the ones with the know-how, the expertise, everything. Then we have the revolutions, right? And independence happens. And obviously the first thing that Africans demanded is that I do. That's another way to say let's go, or in this case get out, so they had to get out, and leave the country. And when they left the countries, you are leaving it with people who don't know how to run these systems, who don't have the expertise on how a government administration is supposed to work, how they are supposed to acquire services to anyone. And on that point also, I will use, for example, the South African context. The government that we had under budget, their focus in providing services was for the white minority, not the entire nation of South Africa. So that's why I can also sometimes sympathize with our government and the first administration that we had. They had to come in and not only just take take a government and its systems and its structures that was catering to like most probably less than 1%, and they had to find innovative ways to immediately, and I mean next day, be able to ensure that they are catering to the whole nation. This is what Africans had to deal with. And so you can imagine and you can understand why many a times the first administrations of democratic governments that came after colonization went back to Europe. They went back hands open, begging, because they just didn't know how to do it. And again, it shows that this was intentionally done because these European powers knew that they don't know how to run the state, they don't know how to think our systems. And instead of them saying, okay, we will capacitate you, we will build your guys' know-how, we will build your guys' industry and make sure that you guys are able to fully function independently on your own. No, they agreed to immediately go knowing very well what was going to happen, and they've continuously kept the cycle going on in different ways. And one of the other ways in which now in today's day and age this is done is again through many of these foreign aids that are given through the IMF or the World Bank. These aids come with very rigid and strict conditions that oftentimes are at the disadvantage of the very African countries that are needing assistance. So one of the things they'll say is that they must remove all tariffs for Western businesses that are coming in. And it's like, how? When the main people that African countries import and export with are the West in and of itself. Because again, another thing that these colonizers did and these enslaved slavers did was that they built infrastructure that would ensure that they are able to get the goods within Africa to the port so that it could go to those countries. But they were intentional about making sure that that infrastructure does not allow for countries to be able to trade and, you know, work with one another within the continent. And that's why even nowadays in Africa, there's still a lot of, like, you know, developments that are still needing to happen when it comes to Africans trading in terms of imports and exports amongst each other. Hence the significance of the African Trade Free Agreement, and its mission in parts is to try and like solve this conundrum essentially that African states find themselves in. So yeah, this, you can see how it ties into, you know, neo-colonization in so many different ways. But another thing that neo-colonization has been able to, you know, continue from colonization is the use of education systems to create this very elitist society and elite class. And what colonization did was that they used education as a tool, or rather a weapon of control. So that would mean that only a few minority would get educated and thereby elevate their status, elevate their economic means, and essentially in turn be used as the ones that would further now oppress and control their fellow brethren, instead of it having to be the white faces that everyone knew. And this is something that really still continues on today. I think we see it a lot with how many, you know, Africans have really shared a lot of, you know, disdain in how their leaders are essentially European or Western imperialist puppets, you know. And one example I'll give of how, you know, this was so effectively done, and it continues to manifest today in so many different ways, is how, I know in Ghana during the slave trade, right, they the slave ports would have obviously, you know, Europeans who would constantly be staying there for a duration. So like your generals, your lieutenants, the soldiers that will constantly be there to man the slave port consistently. So these men, obviously, they were away for their wives for like long periods of time. And what would they end up doing? They would end up marrying one of the local women in the near villages. And so what would end up happening is that this woman wouldn't now live in the village. She would live in like the houses that were, you know, near the slave ports, and the children that would come from those unions would oftentimes then be put and be educated to be now the next, you know, generation that would be used to man the ports, you know, and what you call this increased relations between the, you know, the Africans and the colonizers, because they would obviously know English, but they would also know their native tongue due to their mothers, right, being, you know, African. So obviously this caused a huge rift, because, you know, many of these individuals were like caught in between these two worlds where they weren't fully accepted, because on one side it's like your father only accepts you because you're here in the ports, but you can't go back to Europe and meet the rest of your half siblings and, you know, integrate in that society because you're still essentially black, right? But then on the other side, the villagers see you as like this betrayer, as they see you as a weapon of use of the oppressor. So you can't really fully also integrate in that society. But another thing that this has also, I feel like, caused as well is like this issue of colorism, because obviously we know these were like mixed race babies, and I think also maybe this is also another way in which colorism, you know, came into suit, because obviously they formed an elite society or an elite group in how they were educated and were better, you know, had better living conditions economically due to them, you know, having the background that they had family wise. So as we can see, guys, like a lot of these things that, you know, President Traoré is dealing with or is, you know, combating and, you know, confronting head on, deals with a lot of the realities that Walter Rodney's book brings up. And obviously I've just given like, you know, 10% of the book. I do suggest that, you know, if you can get the book, read it. It's exceptional, and it's so amazing at how it speaks truth to power, and it's still so relevant in today's day and age. So with that, guys, we are going to move on to the next segment of the show, which is Women Across Africa. guys, women across Africa, I've got two stories that I want to share with you guys, and these two stories also, as always, just here to just encourage us and shed light on things that maybe we might not necessarily be aware of. So the first story is I'm speaking to a woman in Kenya by the name of Njoke, who was arrested because of how she stormed into the Ministry of Health offices last week to protest the delays that were happening in the social health authority implementing the universal health coverage that they are in charge of. So this particular lady was arrested at a hospital in Kenya when she was applying for her knee surgery, and she has been having some difficulties in getting the necessary services, and I'm sure, insurance coverage that she needs for this procedure. And so during her arrest, she was initially denied bail, and this obviously caused a great deal of public outrage that talked about how the government, instead of it dealing with this situation that is a real reality, they rather took the route of intimidating a woman who was just really there to vent out her frustrations and how she believes her government is failing her. So luckily, the former Nairobi governor, Mike Sonko, she intervened, and the negotiations that he was able to do allowed for her to be released. And I think this, guys, is again just showing an issue that is faced world round, that is this issue of universal health coverage. There's a lot of back and forth debates that are happening. Some countries have done a great job in being able to implement it. Others are still it's a work in progress to really ensure that their citizens are getting the best benefits that they can, because guys, health can be very expensive, and there's nothing like being challenged health-wise that will make you realize that every other problem you had was really irrelevant. So health really is a basic right that everyone should be able to have access to. And then my second story covers how the African Development Bank is promoting women empowerment through sustainable energy business development. And before I get into the story, I just want to say Happy International Day of Clean Energy. Yes, that's today. Did you know that? I definitely didn't know that until I came across this article. So this is really nice to know that we have a day that is dedicated to this. And I love the story so much because it highlights again how Africans are really spearheading a lot of their own initiatives to become climate resistant and ensure that many of us experience climate justice, who are being faced with a lot of the unfortunate consequences that come from the environmental and economic sometimes impacts that we find ourselves in due to climate change. So the bank has got a fund known as the African Climate Change Fund, and they are currently operating in 26 African countries, working with a portfolio of 30 projects, and they currently have a budget that's approximately around $18 million. And so it has been so great to see how this bank has and this initial fund has been so intentional in reaching and targeting women who are SMMEs owners, and have been able to help them to upscale their businesses that have been not only impactful economically, but also have been impactful environmentally in how they promote clean energy solutions and innovations. And one such area is in the clean cooking area, which is something that the bank prioritizes because of how in May of last year they pledged to put in $2 billion over a span of 10 years towards towards ideas and solutions that are going to be working towards clean cooking solutions. And this is so important because, guys, these ideas and these upcoming businesses are going to save the lives of 600,000 women and children who every year die, right, from their exposure of secondary smoke that comes from cooking over fire using either fuel, wood, and charcoal. And guys, this kind of initiative is so I can't express how important it is in again, going back to the point that I'm always pushing, the fact that as African women, we are so different. Our daily lived realities are different. And as such, the solutions that we need are going to be different. So this is just one such example of tailored solutions that are actually improving lives in real time. Just so amazing. Another thing that I really was excited about is that the bank is hosting their annual Mission 300 Africa Energy Summit. That's happening tomorrow on the 27th, and it's also happening on the 28th of January. It's going to be in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and they're obviously going to be bringing in stakeholders from across the continent to basically discuss how they can boost access to electricity for more homes and businesses across the African continent. If you guys didn't know, I believe that about 600 million Africans do not have access to electricity. I will fact check that again, and I'll put it somewhere here. But guys, this is it's like 600 million. That's a huge number. And it goes back to something that I always say we have to always have at the forefront of our minds. That is the fact that while we are having our ambitions and our dreams and our desires and our goals and our strategies to leapfrog into the fourth industrial revolution, let us not forget to make a bridge for those who are yet to experience the first industrial revolution. That is water and clean water and sanitation. That is things like paved roads. That is things like electricity, right? There are some people who haven't had the privilege of these things, so we cannot forget the group here while we are having another group here that's wanting to leapfrog, So yeah, I'm really excited about this mission, because also this summit has a particular mission of making sure that 300 million Africans by 2030 will have power and electricity. So that was just some exciting, fun, article that I wanted to end off with when it comes to our women across Africa. So guys, now we are going to move on to women across the week, and this one is really, really exciting. As always, if you've made it here to Women Across the Week, you are... I was hoping you finished that off, but essentially you are the bomb.com. And this woman across Africa is a young woman who is really, serving as a leader in an industry that is male dominated. So really, really excited to read her story. Her name, or rather this week's Woman of the Week, is taking us back to Nigeria, and we are meeting a woman by the name of Lucia Gomez, and she is a young artist, or rather pencil artist, who is really working to promote self-reliance and use her art to change and challenge a lot of gender issues that many young women who are in her community are faced with. And before I even get deeper into the story, I want to just share a quick quote that I came across in one of these articles I was reading by Rob Talley, and it says, "Art has the power to change the way we see the world, awakening us to new perspectives, ideas, and values. It can take us back in time to reflect on our past or push us further into our future. Art can bring awareness to social issues and foster a sense of acceptance, bringing people together regardless of background." And I found this to be so beautiful and yet so true. And I believe that this young lady Lucia is doing exactly that. She really is using her talent to foster difficult conversations and to really spearhead change in areas that women have really been intentionally sidelined or overlooked. So this story is so exciting. It's just another illustration of how our ways of advocating for change can be so different and so diverse, which is so encouraging, because it means is that literally everyone can have a seat at the table, and everyone will and everyone who comes with whatever it is that they offer, it will be valuable in advancing our efforts to change and development, and bettering the lives of all Africans across the continent. So guys, with that, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I am so happy to have had you partake in this discussion. As always, don't forget to comment your thoughts down below, and also share this with others, because I do think that such initiatives and great work that President Traoré has done deserves to be shared broadly by all of us. We do have that responsibility, and I think it's part of a way of resisting the system. Because one thing about it, the revolution will be televised, guys. So please let us do that and make sure that other Africans are able to partake in this amazing celebration that our fellow brethren in Burkina Faso are enjoying. And with that, guys, thank you so much. I will see you guys as always very soon. Goodbye and have a great week ahead.
Pencil artist Lucia Gomez is getting set to begin a drawing for a client. She says she began drawing in 2018 for passion, and it has grown to a business.
Gender should not be a restriction. You can do anything you want to do. Like, I compete with male artists sometimes. So it's not about the gender, it's about what is inside of you. When I started doing art, I didn't have the motive of earning from it. It was just the passion that drove me into it. But while doing it now, I now realize there is money in art. It actually pays my bills.
Lucia's drawings take about a day, depending on what it is she is drawing. Many people are thrilled by them because of their beauty, but being a woman is also an advantage. Lucia Gomez enjoys support from individuals and organizations who use her drawings as gifts or display them in strategic locations for decorative purposes. She's also proud to serve as a role model for young women in northern Nigeria, a region where challenges like teenage pregnancies are prevalent. Millions of young people in Nigeria are out of school, and many of them are impoverished girls. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world, and 75% of them are girls. The government says it is doing all it can to encourage school enrollment and entrepreneurship among young people, such as building more schools and giving credit facilities to small businesses. Artists say people like Lucia are a good example for young people to explore their artistic skills, especially girls, and be self-reliant.
Art is not just drawing and painting. Even soap making, textile design, tailoring and all are part of art. You can't cut effectively. To be a good fashion designer, you must be an artist. For hair weaving, you can't be able to do good designs without all this creativity in mind. So art has a great way of assisting the ladies, not only any human being.
Lucia is now a final year student in university studying archaeology. She looks forward to mentoring younger people in pencil sketches, especially girls, and increasing her client base across Nigeria and beyond. Tassim Akende, CGTN Jos.